part of A Midsummer Night's Zoom, and for joining us for this talkback. Of course, this talkback will be led by my partner at New Swan, the esteemed Julia Lupton, who's professor of English and quite a renowned Shakespearean scholar. She'll start with a few comments, and then we'll bring the entire cast back to answer any questions you might have. Julia?
Thank you, Eli, and thank you, actors. It has been such a blast and an honor working with all of you on this project. So in part one last night, we saw the basic outlines of the concept of A Midsummer Night's Zoom, right? Our play begins in Zoomland, everyone on separate screens. In the forest, the actors get to use the same backgrounds, and snap camera filters add magic. It's still Zoom, but we feel like we are in a new place. So what just happened in Acts 4 and 5 when our lovers wake up and have to return to Zoomland? Well, first, I hope you notice the gorgeous backgrounds that Eli chose for each lover to fall asleep in. These lovely diffused circles of light bounce off Puck's glistening dewdrops, creating these soft focused dreamscapes, one for each lover. This bouquet of bubbling backgrounds evokes these multiple consciousnesses, which touch and brush against each other like clouds or pollen or feathers or passing thoughts. This transitional dream space is both shared and not shared, just as Helena says that Demetrius is both my own and not my own. Wow. Once we return to Zoomland, everyone has the same background again, but that background is the theater, the New Swan Theater, where we have performed in the open air the last 8 summers. And the wedding party gathers in the theater, and their greetings are warm and fun and casual. What up, Helena says, right? She's finally comfortable with herself. When the play of Pyramus and Thisbe begins, did you notice that the snap camera filters make a comeback? Before, those filters were only used by the fairies and by Bottom. They were a sign of magic. Now they dress up our bumbling actors. They've become the sign of a different kind of magic, the magic of theater. Here's another choice that I really, really love. Theseus's speech on the imagination, which is quite long and complex, has been divided between Theseus and Hippolyta. It's brilliant and fun. Monologue becomes dialogue. And these two speakers who are getting married to each other enter into a new kind of conversation with each other. They build the speech together. That passage ends with a phrase which to me is really key to the meaning of the whole drama. Hippolyta says, yeah, the lovers were kind of talking crazy about what happened in the forest, but nonetheless, it adds up to something of great constancy. So what's constancy? Well, it's coherence and consistency, but it's also fidelity and resilience, virtues we need now. Constancy is what we are aiming at in the theater, what we're aiming at in this production. So what's the message of A Midsummer Night's Zoom? What's the takeaway? Well, for me, the message is this. Look, folks, we're all living in a dystopian Zoomland, a situation of rules and constraints, also of dangers and real privations. But we also have some new tools to build and rebuild community and connection. And Zoom theater is a part of that construction work. Isn't that why we're here tonight? Isn't that why we all showed up? We're showing up for each other. We're showing up for a common world. We're creating something of great constancy. I know that I will be forever changed. So let's hear from Eli Simon and the actors, and let's also hear from you. Please post any questions that you'd like us to raise with the actors and the director in the live chat next to this image. Welcome back, actors. So great to see you. Welcome, welcome. Fabulous. Well, let's start with a question that I think is for Eli, which has to do with the choice of the filters. They're hilarious, and we loved them. So, can you talk? Eli, it was kind of a director, but also a collaborative choice.
Sure. I mean, this play has so much magic in it, and it's maybe Shakespeare's most magical play. And under normal circumstances, we might throw on a donkey head, let's say, on bottom, which we had in our live performance. We would have different costumes and so forth for the fairies, but we're not anywhere close to our costume shop, our prop shop, our mask builders. The actors, and I would always think like the actors are somewhere together, but they're actually all in their own houses and apartments, which is just kind of a crazy thought. So one way that we could affect those transformations was with the snap camera filters. There's hundreds of them. So we kind of just kept going through all together and sharing ideas about what might work. For example, all of the fairies chose their own sets of wings. We tried some different donkey heads and some different looks for Oberon and for Puck. Although I think for Oberon, Sean, we just kind of picked that right away, yes. But anyway, it just seemed to work. It took us a little time to figure out how to use them and to make sure that they were consistently available to us. And so we stuck with it. It was an experiment.
Great. Here's a question I think is for Thomas Varga, but maybe also for Eli. This is from Kari. Can you talk about the process of adapting for guitar and making it playable for acoustic guitar here? Are you adapting Renaissance music, or is this, as I believe it is, newly composed music for the New Swan?
Yeah. So the music that we had, that's a combination of obviously the musical cues that were different, but the music that I played on guitar was the same from what we did in live production, and that was a combination of some music that was composed by our composer for the show. For example, that last kind of at the end song, "Now Until the Break of Day," was sort of composed for the show. And then the other stuff, the kind of small stuff throughout, like the charms and kind of turning some of those magical moments into music, or up and down, kind of casting that spell on the forest. Those are things that I composed myself based on the lyrics in the play. So some of it was looking at parts that might have been originally presented as just poetry and seeing music in it, and bringing in my own interest in playing guitar, and Eli asked me to bring it in and kind of come up with my own musical response to it, and some of it was music that was again composed for the show. So yeah, I think it was a little more difficult to make sure it all was heard as well. I wish it could have been heard a little bit better with our speakers, but that was something we had to kind of play around with.
Beautiful. Here's a question from Sarah Elizabeth Royer. And this, I really like to hear several of you respond to this because I think it's so important. Can the actors speak to translating their expressions and movements to Zoom? And Sarah especially liked Moat's expressions, very comical. So maybe Jaylon wants to start.
Can you repeat the question?
So Jaylon, can you speak to translating your expressions and movements to Zoom? People really loved what you did with Wall.
Well, it's funny because I'm big on stage already, so I have to really scale things back for this medium, especially because it's really right in your face. So I think something Eli said, he's like, you don't have to work as hard as you do maybe in the Swan to be like read or seen in a certain way. I think the little stuff is way easier to read and a lot more fun for an audience member to watch in this medium than it would be in the Swan. So I did have to pull myself back, even though what you saw was a lot.
Does someone else want to talk to this issue of physical acting and expressive acting on Zoom?
I can talk to it a little bit. Part of it is the frame, literally the frame of the screens. So I had to tape out like markers for myself on the floor of like when I would be no longer in the frame, which was interesting. And for a lot of us, I'm sure like the space we had against our green screen was like, sorry, I went away. It was it's very small, and so it was, that part was really challenging. It was kind of acting to the camera but not having the ability for the camera to follow you.
Yeah, Sean.
I'll add that it also at times encouraged us not to be physical. Sometimes because of limitations of the box, like I was noticing that everything that was happening basically below here was not seen anyway, and that all of my physical work would have to be up here. It kind of encouraged us to embrace the language more, and so that I think was very helpful at times, to depend less on the physicalizing and make more of the language, which from what I understand, there's a fair amount of poetic language in Shakespeare's plays, so that was really helpful.
Puck, Thomas.
Yeah, just kind of following up on that, a little kind of interesting change that I think is related to physical is with this medium, when you have something like an aside or something that's more confidential with the audience, something that you don't get to do on stage is kind of get up close and sort of talk to the audience, which especially for some of those kind of secretive or kind of bringing the audience in moments was something that isn't possible on stage and is a kind of a cool, you know, thing to be able to get from Zoom that isn't possible on stage.
Beautiful. So Hope and Fox, you come back as Theseus and Hippolyta, and you have that incredible dialogue about the imagination. And I love the way you share it. It's really just gorgeous. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you conceive of these roles and where you think this couple is when we get to the end of the play? Maybe how sharing that speech helps get them there or expresses where they are. I just thought that was so brilliant.
Yeah, I mean I hadn't actually, I guess, thought of it that way, but now that you say it, it kind of makes sense that they're like trying to piece together this like really poetic, like weird layout, like the poet and this and like that and piecing it all together. I think they start to see other like sides of like them, like as a couple, and like piecing this together and being like, yeah, I get that. Do you get this? Oh yeah, I get it. And like start and just like start the play being like, oh, we're just excited to get married and whatnot. But then towards the end, it's, I guess, maybe they find like a deeper love through that, because it's definitely some complex stuff they're trying to piece together. Fox, do you have anything?
No, yeah, I think it also just speaks to, just certain situations is going to bring about different conversations that I think are needed. And I think it's really big that Theseus ends up telling Aegeus no, and it's like we're going to allow it to happen, just from it just, I think that's why it's just great to just meet different people and get to know different people, because so many times you can have certain preconceived notions about whoever it is, and just from that conversation, I think it speaks to the type of people that Theseus and Hippolyta are, that they're willing to open up, that they're willing to open up and think deeply about things, because like they the king and queen, they don't have to think about it. They can just be like, well, okay, guess they go see the play, we go home, it's going on. You know what I mean? Like they really don't have to. But I would love to see like how they would be as parents, you know what I mean? Because it's just like, this is just leading deeply to like they're thinking outside the box. Yeah.
So this is a question from the wonderful Don Hill, and I think I'll put it to Eli first, which is to talk about the rehearsal process working in Zoom. What are the challenges? How did you make this happen? People studying this to do their own Zoom productions, what are your recommendations and what are your takeaways from all of this?
I would say that if you drink, you might want to have a double before you start your rehearsals. You know, I mean, I don't drink, so I'm just guessing. But it is really tricky.
Not the actors, not the actors, of
Not the
course.
actors, no,
That
no,
would be
never
unprofessional.
it's just really it's really treacherous. I think that the technological difficulties of doing this were really the only obstacle to putting a great show together. And you know, we could hear the compression of voices tonight. We were talking about Thomas's wonderful songs. They sound about, I think, about 1/10 as wonderful on Zoom as they do live, because the uh, the microphones can't pick up two things at once, so they really can't pick up the guitar well and the voice well. You're only as good as your Wi-Fi, and everybody's Wi-Fi is variable. You need a lot of patience. You got to take a lot of breaks, because I think it's really hard to look at a computer screen. At least it is for me. After an hour, which is one of the reasons we divided the play in half, so that people wouldn't have to sit and watch, right, Julia, for 2 hours. So you need to take more breaks than you do when you're working live. For me personally, it's harder to look at a computer screen than like a TV. I don't know if it's brighter or what it is about it. So a lot of patience and a lot of experimentation. And I think if you're putting a show together, it's good to test your system well in advance of starting to rehearse on whatever you think is going to work, because it may not. In this process, we had to pivot. We had to take 2 serious pivots, and we only rehearsed this play for 1 week. So we really shifted 180 degrees twice. And I guess that's my advice. I don't know. Be patient and take your time, Fox.
Just speaking on that, I also think that you have to, like, within theater and with performing and putting things together, we do this because it gives us a chance to be imaginative, and we get to have our minds, big, and think outside the box and whatnot. But I think you also have to be honest with yourself, and to know, like, like, we want to do a lot on Zoom, but you can't do a lot on Zoom. You know what I mean? You got to be willing to try stuff. And as Eli just said, and then, okay, we like that, but we got to let it go, which already happens in the theater, but I think it happens on a longer scale. I think you have more time, whereas on Zoom and with what we had to, like, all right, we want to go big like that, but, like, will that read? I think also you got to just be honest, and just like what Eli was saying, I really appreciated yeah, it's not great to the eyes to be looking at Zoom for a long time. So let's just be honest and make sure that because Eli said it yesterday, that we're all learning this Zoom thing. Even Zoom is learning Zoom and trying to make it better. So with that, I think we're always concerned and thinking about actors' health. But, like, it's great to be honest with yourself and be like, all right, let's not be on Zoom for how long. And I think that also gets your brain to, like, think of things quicker and more smoother.
Great, thank you. So there's a question here from Ken Reinhardt about cues, and maybe Tolu and Meg might comment about what it's like to, the comparison between how cues might work in a regular theater and how you respond to. We had a lot of different musical cues. We also had to be really careful, and this relates to a question that Sky has. The blocking of these scenes had to do with entrances and exits, and they were very, very precise, so that we would know where we were on stage, where you would be on stage. Do you guys want to just talk a little bit about that? And
yeah, I can talk a little bit.
Thank you.
I don't know. I've just been thinking this whole time, shout out to Merle, because
Yes.
I don't think that we could have done half of what we're doing. I don't know the behind the scenes of New Swan. I'm just an actor, but Merle really put a lot of work into making it work on Skype. And when that didn't work, he pivoted in 2 seconds to Zoom. And I didn't have to worry. All I had to worry about was getting my background and my snap camera working. But Merle was, like, integral in kind of creating the flow that you see now.
That is really true. Thank you for saying that, Tolu.
Yes, we had great stage management. And
we just could not have done the show without Merle and Miriam, our stage manager, who really held everything together and also did all of the sound cues and kind of turned into a sound designer on this show out of necessity. So we're greatly indebted to our tech team.
We just have a few more minutes, so I'm hoping that some of the actors who haven't had a chance to just reflect on this experience, I think Meg and Crystal, do you guys just want to say something about what this was like? I mean, you were in the original production and now in this production, and what does it mean for you? I feel so changed.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit on that. Well, Swan is deeply, deeply special to me. And this was my first experience. This show was my first experience with Shakespeare, actually. And I was even chatting with Sean a little bit last night about it and how special it was to work on this show with these people. And going a little bit back to Dawn's question about working this show on Zoom, I think this is my second or third Zoom production now. And this was just effortless and seamless on my end because there's so much stored memory that's living in my body of relationship with these people. So yeah, there's technical things to figure out, but the collective and the New Swan community was so present in this production. So it was just a really, really fantastic experience to get to relive this and reawaken it in a different way.
Crystal, what do you feel what's changed for you in your relationship to this role, to this platform? What was it like to go through this again?
Yeah, that's so funny. It was also my first Shakespeare production. There's a lot of first Shakespeare productions in this. It's also Fox's first Shakespeare production. I think that's really awesome that Midsummer was our first. Well, yeah, because like Meg was saying, we had the experience in the Swan, and to translate it over to Zoom, it made things a lot easier. But it was also like really exciting to try to do a play on Zoom. I think 2-3 years from now, I think I'll be really proud to say that I ventured to do a Shakespeare production on Zoom. And the technical difficulties were there. I will say, look, Miriam, Merle, and Eli handled the brunt of it, and we got to have fun because they laid the groundwork. And so for me, it was just really exciting to try different things with it, like to look at the ceiling or the wall and pretend to talk to Lysandra, Demetrius, and Helena. It was, I think as actors, we're always looking for new challenges, and this was just another challenge that was very.
And Michael, do you want to talk about staging Pyramus and Thisbe? I mean, Shakespeare's Cats, how you kind of reintroduce humor and a similar interpretation that Thisbe goes from falsetto with the pink wig to really becoming the character. I mean, I thought that you used the snap camera very well to sort of continue to develop that interpretation.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, for everybody who saw the show 2 years ago who didn't, the thing that kills me the most is not being able to slide down that ladder slowly every night. That's the biggest issue. Like so slowly. I'm so sorry.
36 minutes over the whole time.
I want to say that's the first time a director ever told me you can take more time with anything I've ever done. No, but like with staging Pyramus and Thisbe, we went from these amazing people. We've got a really great repertoire from doing this before, and then Tolu came in and just like jumped right in, and we had a great time with her too, because she's an awesome quince and awesome leader. And going from what we had done, which was intensely physical, we had curtains falling down, we had the phone dog on a string that was being pulled around, props were flying everywhere. To have to do it so still was so hard for me. Anyway, I fidget a lot throughout this entire show because I just couldn't just sit still and look at the camera. But for Thisbe, the fun thing is going between, like, he's not, or Flute isn't just an idiot. He wants to do a good job because he sees Bottom doing a really good job. but he just kind of densely starts believing it too much. And when Bottom is just out and out of it, he kind of forgets where he is. And that's kind of what the rationale behind, like in the original play, he took off his wig because he was like, oh, this is more important. This is deeper than that. Bottom like is dead. And I believe he's dead. And he like channels that into the words he's been provided through the writer of Pyramus and Thisbe. And that just kind of is a nice moment for him, as opposed to just ending it kind of like willy-nilly falsetto. It's no, it's fun and games. So yeah, that's kind of where he goes, and it gives Pyramus and Thisbe a little bit more of a sweet note to
Yeah,
end off.
it was beautiful. Sean, do you have any final thoughts about Oberon, about Zoom, acting on Zoom? Do you feel that there are new things that are being made possible, or do you feel that it's really just kind of frustrating?
A little bit of both, and I'm going to start with the negative and then hopefully end with the positive. The negative is, yeah, it's highlighting all of the things we love about live theater that we don't get to experience. At least for me, you know, it's really highlighting, oh, there's something intangible about a live space and a live audience and live actors, and that sort of communal experience that can't be replicated online. I think the positive is the positive I feel like that comes out of most artistic processes when we are dealing with restrictions. You know, the positive takeaways are we are all inspired by how we are watching people solve problems. And I think and deal with restrictions, and art is constantly facing restrictions. And so we celebrate how people are dealing with those restrictions, fighting through them when they can, embracing them when they can, looking at not what we don't have available, but what do we have available to highlight what we do well. And I think there's going to be cycles of this. There already has been, and there will continue to be. And I think this is sort of a blip in that cycle of a moment of artists trying to figure out, you know, we can't recapture a live space, but this is the restrictive space we have. How do we absolutely make the most of it for an audience? And this was brought up last night. I think in addition to that, it's the reach. You know, we're taking sort of a version of live theater, a hybrid version, and reaching more people with it in more places in front of a larger audience. And that is that alone, I think, is pretty wonderful and inspiring and motivating to do more of this work, to solve more of these problems.
Absolutely. Eli, do you want to say goodbye to everyone and any final words?
Well, I just am so deeply appreciative of this incredible company for hanging together and working as smoothly and creatively as you all were able to do. And I want to thank all of our wonderful patrons and audience members and supporters for just being with us. We really miss being with you more than anything else. For me, the summer has always been standing outside the theater before the shows and just welcoming everybody to our magical space, and I have really missed that. So this was an attempt to reconnect with you. Julie and I thought it was important, and we hope that you've enjoyed it and felt at least a bit reconnected with us, because that really is why we do it, and it's so important to us. So thank you all very much. And if you tuned in tonight, this was the second part, so be sure to watch the first part. It'll be out of order, but you'll probably still enjoy it. So thank you so much.